The 1988 WWF Royal Rumble took place on January 24th at the Copps Coliseum in Hamilton, Ontario. This is, of course, the very first Royal Rumble, and happened yet again, a little battle between the WWF and their competition, which put on Bunkhouse Stampede, which, I'll be honest with you, we'll eventually get to that show in our Golden Age Rewind. I was not a huge fan of the Bunkhouse Stampede, but this edition of the Rumble, we know, was kind of unique in that it would certainly evolve over the years from what it was here in terms of the setup and all of that. But this is our official Royal Rumble 1998 review. Let's jump into the show itself and discuss what stood out and maybe what we can recommend here on a rewatch of the 1988 Royal Rumble. We start off the announcers for this one in the announce booth, Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura. They hype up the night's big events, and we're going to start with a big match here. It's Rick Rude versus Ricky Steamboat. Several years later, in 1992, these two in WCW would have quite a clash, to say the least. But on paper, you're thinking, this is a great way to start this show. Rick Rude, Ricky Steamboat, 1988. These two guys doing some good work. However, we kind of get into it, and you'll see things go a little bit differently than maybe you would expect. Jesse brings up Rude's physique here. Vince basically salivating and foaming at the mouth, looking at the ravishing one. There's a fan in the front row who has a megaphone, starts chanting, "Rudy, Rudy, Rudy." I'm not sure if that's aimed to sort of anger Rick Rude, but not exactly maybe the best way to get out of heel, I think. There are probably better ways, although having a megaphone is a good start. Fan sort of nonsense aside, these two really, again, it never really feels like it gets into that next gear. Kind of got a lot of rest holds here. It's the definition of a slow build. Steamboat starts to gain some momentum. We get a couple near falls in this one, but here comes the ref bump as Rude throws the referee in the way and then apparently makes Steamboat submit to win the match. However, the bell rings, and as Rude is celebrating in the aisle, we, of course, get the announcement of Steamboat as the winner via DQ at 16 minutes and 40 seconds. So this thing went 16 minutes and 40 seconds. And like I said, on paper, if you're looking at a Rick Rude, Ricky Steamboat match at that length, you're probably thinking, this is a great match. To be honest, this really was one that felt like it was sort of there to fill some time. Like I mentioned, just from my personal enjoyment, I didn't think this was something that got to that next gear, and certainly going into this, if you were watching it for the first time, you were probably expecting a bit more than what you got out of this match. And the finish, it's 1988. I'm not going to harp on it too much about a DQ finish here, but the crowd gets a chance to cheer because Steamboat's the winner. Rude thinks he's won it. Not the case after the referee sequence there. But now we get to something completely different. Dino Bravo has come out for Jesse Ventura's weightlifting challenge. I don't know why, but this is one of the most memorable things from the show for me. Frenchie Martin is sort of speaking, and I don't even know what he's saying here. But Dino Bravo this guy is jacked at this point in 1988. He's going for the world bench press record, and he asked the fans to be totally silent. Not with that woman with the megaphone in the front row. She's not going to be silent. She's probably still yelling at Rick Rude. Bravo easily destroys the warm-up weight, which, then he just starts destroying 505 pounds here as Mean Gene Okerlund's giving the play-by-play on Dino Bravo lifting this in the bench press record goal here. And Vince, I'm sure, you can only imagine Vince's probably look as he's watching this right now. This is not probably the best segment ever, to put it lightly. Gene yelling at the crowd for making some noise as Bravo continues to get very upset. So remember, Dino wanted full silence here. We're up to like 595 pounds or something like that, and he still has to get to 705. This segment's been going for a while. So we've been watching this man just bench press for a bit here at different, weight sequences. So we start here. Like I said, at one point we were at 505. He's just throwing that up like it's nothing. We got to 595, but he's still got to get to 705. This segment at this point as we're still on the race for 705, has gone like 15 minutes. And then he gets to the world record. If you've seen it before, you can remember the clip, with a little bit of help from Jesse Ventura. This was just a brutal segment to watch. Again, even if you're looking for some nostalgia, yes, you're going to have a little bit here, perhaps just with the participants involved, but this segment went so long, and it's impressive, and nonetheless, I mean, I'll be completely honest and admit, I could not probably do the 705 on the bench press. So it's interesting to watch a man do that, but at the same time, this was a very long segment, just to watch someone do bench presses, even with the interactions with the crowd. Probably not the most memorable thing, and will not make our recommended matches, not a match, but even anything recommended on the show. This is probably going to be at the bottom for this, unless you just want to watch Dino Bravo pound some weight here. All right, next match. The Jumping Bomb Angels are going to take on the Glamour Girls, who are the current women's tag team champions. If you've listened to our Survivor Series 1987 review here on Rewind Wrestling as part of our Golden Age Rewind series, you know that I named the Jumping Bomb Angels the MVP of the Survivor Series 1987 show. There are other couple great choices on that one, but they just stood out so much, and they were such a unique, team at this kind of era in the WWF. And it's kind of 100% clear from the start, probably, who the better team is here. They were just, again, undoubtedly the best tag team in the promotion by a million miles or so. But this is something where you're going to have multiple falls. The Glamour Girls win the first fall because they're going to get off to the good start. And the Angels able to come out and get the second fall in this one, much to the crowd's approval. The crowd really behind them here because, like I said, you could tell there was a sense from the crowd that we are watching something that, we need to pay attention to, because that's how good this duo was. We get the double drop kick from the Jumping Bomb Angels, and the crowd just erupts here. This is the biggest part. If you go back and watch it, to me, I had in my notes, it's just seeing the crowd just go wild whenever they hit the double drop kick and win the titles at 15-21. I mean, the crowd's just going bonkers here. The match was very, very good. I'd even go as far as to saying, it's an above-average type match, whether we're talking men's or women's matches, kind of at this period on this particular show in 1988. And it was proof that this duo they were such stars because of their unique style. It would wind up being their only title win in the WWF, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we do the deep dive on the Royal Rumble 1988. Remember, these are just show reviews. We'll go into this more on the channel with kind of a deep dive into the events surrounding the Royal Rumble, and we'll talk more about these two. But, look, when I watched the Royal Rumble for the first time, and, this show, 1988, I couldn't even tell you when I did watch it for the first time, but I hadn't seen much of their work prior to this era. But going back, and every time you rewatch it, they were just so ridiculously good. I'm going to go ahead and probably spoil it here, but this is the best thing on the card. And we'll get to the Rumble in a second. It's not that far off, but I thought this was probably the most standout thing on the show. And yes, if you're listening to this, in 2026, we know kind of the state of women's wrestling and all that. But back then, this was just, you were seeing a special team. And especially kind of for the WWF at this time, that they were about as standout as it gets. So the Jumping Bomb Angels are the new WWF Women's Tag Team Champions in what is going to be a recommended match on this show. All right, the video package here, we get the replay of Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. You can listen to that review here on the channel. And then we get Hogan turning down the $1 Million Man's offer for the WWF Championship belt. That sets up our next segment here, and it is the Hogan-Andre contract signing. Hogan is wearing the most 80s outfit imaginable, one of the more glaring things on this show. Jack Tunney's here. He's making an appearance. Really no reason to fully analyze this signing here. It's like every other wrestling contract signing you've seen before, probably. A little bit of stalling, a little bit of delaying, and then the eventual fight between the two that results in Hogan getting beat down by Andre here. So that sells it for the match that these two will have that we will talk about here soon enough. So another contract signing. I mean, for every reason you could think of, it made sense to do Hogan and Andre again, and we know eventually what that's going to set up with these two over the next little bit. So, all right, this is our first ever Royal Rumble match, the 1988 Royal Rumble match. Trivia notes, who were the first two men to ever enter a Royal Rumble? Bret Hart and Tito Santana. They're the first two in this one. Butch Reed comes in at number 3, Jim Neidhart at number 4, and Tito Santana is taking a beating right now from these three with Bret and Neidhart and Butch Reed. They're just taking it to him. Somehow, they can't find a way to throw him over the top, though. Business starts to pick up as Jake Roberts comes in at number 5. He immediately throws out Butch Reed. Bret hits a nasty pile driver on Santana at one point. So again, Santana's just taking an absolute beating. And we're not even, 6 participants into this match. Speaking of the 6th participant, it's Harley Race. Jim Brunzell is into the mix at number 7. Keep in mind, he was the person who eliminated Bret at Survivor Series in that big tag team match that we talked about in our Survivor Series 1987 review. And now, Sam Houston comes in at number 8. The Hart Foundation finally send Tito out of there. So a good showing from Tito. Good babyface profile as always, but he's out of there via Bret and Neidhart. Danny Davis is in at number 9. Now you've got Harley Race doing some acrobatics with the ropes while Jake tries to send him over. Boris Zukov comes in at number 10. Don Morocco is number 11. Nikolai Volkov tries to take his spot, but that doesn't happen. That leads to Zukov getting eliminated. And now Nikolai Volkov is your official number 12 entrant as Harley gets dropped over by Morocco. Now we're going to welcome Hacksaw Jim Duggan at the number 13 position. Jesse says, this is Duggan's style of match because he certainly knows nothing about wrestling. Tremendous stuff from Jesse, as always. Jim Brunzell gets eliminated by Nikolai Volkov. Ron Bass comes in at number 14. B. Brian Blair is number 15. Hillbilly Jim, number 16. He gets in quickly and tosses Jim Neidhart out of there. Dino Bravo is in at number 17, so as if the bench press exhibition was not enough, here comes Dino Bravo into the Rumble. Sam Houston gets thrown out. Forgot to mention that a second ago, but it is what it is. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, another little funny spot here if you catch it when you do the rewatch. Basically hugging Volkov and patting him on the head during a rest spot in the corner. And here comes the Ultimate Warrior. Now, number 18. Bret's finally thrown out by Morocco. One Man Gang comes in to destroy someone at number 19. And then the number 20th entrant, the final entrant here, the Junkyard Dog. Now, here's your finishing sequence. Nikolai Volkov gets tossed out of there, as does Hillbilly Jim. Davis gets clotheslined out by Hacksaw. Warrior then gets thrown out of the match to really no reaction at all. We know that's going to change here pretty soon for the Ultimate Warrior in 1988. JYD gets thrown out by Bass, and then Morocco tosses Bass out of there. So your first ever Royal Rumble Final Four. It's the One Man Gang, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Dino Bravo, and Don Morocco. So we've got some hosses here in the Final Four, which I think is nice to kind of set the tone that some of these guys are either just jacked or you've got some, a big guy in One Man Gang. You've got kind of the aggressive Hacksaw Jim Duggan in there. I like the idea of doing it this way for the first one. Bravo sends Morocco out of there. Then, as we talked about before, you kind of have that sequence that you know it by now when you see it, and that is where the bad guys start to team up on Hacksaw. So you've got the 2-on-1, heels the advantage here, and you know where this is headed. One Man Gang accidentally knocks out Bravo, and then Hacksaw eliminates the One Man Gang for the win at 33 minutes for your first Royal Rumble. Not much star power in this one when you compare it to kind of the top stars of the time, but remember, this was on television. This is not a pay-per-view special. But to be honest, for a first Royal Rumble and knowing what it would become, this is pretty enjoyable. Like, it is a pretty enjoyable match here overall when you're thinking about just the interactions. And, there's only 20 versus 30 entrants and all that, but I was pretty entertained by this. I thought this was pretty good stuff. Hacksaw winning the first one. Hey, come on, tough guy. Hacksaw gets the win, and like I said, it set up kind of the trope you would see a lot in these Rumbles where you do have kind of that last spot there, whether it's a Royal Rumble or whether it's a Battle Royal. It's just kind of an easy storytelling to have, the final two or the final three is as two heels and one babyface. So he's got to overcome the odds to win. That's what Hacksaw does here. So Hacksaw Jim Duggan is your first ever Royal Rumble winner. And probably if you think about just of all the choices they had available at this time, probably not the worst idea because like we said, you didn't have like a Rude or a Steamboat in there. They had the match earlier, and you didn't have any of those just top level stars. We talked about the Warrior. His time was going to be, eventually getting here in the WWF. But for now, Hacksaw gets the win, and like I said, pretty enjoyable match, I thought, for the first ever Rumble. On the stage, Hulk Hogan is pissed, and this man is sweating profusely. He hypes up the Andre match, so more hype, which, smart move to keep this going after what we saw earlier with Andre attacking Hogan, to really build to that need for fans to see this match. So, good stuff. If you thought the Royal Rumble was the kind of, main thing here to be the highlight main event, that's not the case, because the main event of the show was the Islanders versus the Young Stallions. So, it's kind of had a Saturday night main event type feel to it, right? Where you didn't always get the biggest match at the end of that show, for timing reasons and all that. But so if you remember from the 1987 show, remember Jim Powers got an insane amount of time in the ring during the 20-man tag team match, and now the man's getting rewarded with a main event appearance here. So good for Jim Powers. And as we also saw during that awesome Survivor Series match, the tag team scene was loaded here at the time. When you looked at all the tag teams that have been built up and sort of the history between them, the Islanders control this match early on. Yet again, the highlight is Jesse. Vince, he's going at Vince, and the back and forth is pretty memorable here in this one. Roma gets counted out to give the Islanders the first fall in this one. And it was kind of a sell job of Dolph Ziggler-esque proportions, with Roma selling the knee injury on the outside. And in case you wanted to really get more into this, well, that's not going to happen, because Vince has us cut to an interview on the stage with Andre and Ted DiBiase after the first fall. So the Islanders and the Stallions are just kind of hanging out. But actually what was happening was Roma being tended to after the knee injury. And so that was kind of the way they set it up here. Good bit of storytelling. The match ends with Roma showing the grit to get back into the ring. So the man's come out against all odds, and he's back. But you can't bring that out and give Haku an injury on a platter here, because that man will take advantage here, and he forces Paul Roma to submit to score the victory for the Islanders at 14 minutes. So one of those where it's like, hey, you think about how the match sets up, and you're thinking, all right, well, they're going to get the first fall, second fall, and so forth, but it doesn't really happen here. So they really played up, again, the Paul Roma, a valiant effort, but the Islanders too much, and they take advantage of an opening there to get the win. So there was the 1988 Royal Rumble. The best match, like I said, I probably would, and you can push back if you want a little bit on this. I really enjoyed the Royal Rumble, but the most unique thing on the show really was the Jumping Bomb Angels again, and I would put this right on par with the Rumble match. So take your pick on which one you prefer. If you're not as enamored with the Jumping Bomb Angels, they may not get the choice here, but I thought those two were easily, pretty entertaining and recommended matches, to say the least. The women's tag team title match and the Royal Rumble itself. The MVP, you could either go with maybe Hacksaw, or you could go with the Jumping Bomb Angels again, like I did for Survivor Series 1987. Plenty to choose from, but maybe Hacksaw gets it here. I thought it was a pretty solid effort for the first Rumble. The Rumble itself was good, and like I said, I am going to keep pushing just how different the Jumping Bomb Angels were at the time, and when you go back and watch this show, I'm telling you, it will stand out. And that just, the bigger picture, though, overall, is that the Rumble would really change the entire landscape of the company forever when you think about not just doing it every single year, but what it eventually sets up, right? It sets up your biggest match of your entire calendar year at WrestleMania in the main event and all of those things. So it's always, I think, enjoyable to go back and watch the first one, just because it did sort of set the tone and the foundation for what was to come, even if it's going to evolve a lot, and the stakes are going to get higher because of what the winner would get and all this other stuff. So I think it's just the fact that they introduced this concept itself, right? And able to turn this every year into something where you have all these unique sort of spots and these interactions between rivals and all this stuff. Like, there's just so many ways you can do it. And, this one probably is not going to feel exactly like a lot of the, eventual ones, whether, 1992, 2001, to me, those are two of the top ones probably in WWF history. If you're just ranking Royal Rumbles, it's not going to have that same feel, but it is one that I think you can kind of see the foundation put in place here to where the wheels are in motion and they're seeing things and how they can use this match to really tell some bigger stories. And that would kind of be the main theme, moving forward. So, my thoughts on the 1998 Royal Rumble. You guys let me know what you think. When's the last time you watched the 1998 Rumble? What do you remember most about it? What would be your recommended matches and maybe MVP for this particular show? Remember, on the channel, we are going through here at Rewind Wrestling 4 huge eras from the WWF's history and also other shows as well from WCW and other companies during those time periods, whether it's the Golden Era, Golden Age, whichever one you want to call it, the New Generation Era, the Attitude Era, and the Ruthless Aggression Era. You can find videos, audio, podcasts on the channel from all of those. I appreciate you guys, and let me know your thoughts on the 1988 Royal Rumble.